Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And we're back with our pre-holiday edition of the M Squared TechCast. Well, we just scared the pants off you with cybersecurity risks, and now we have our very own infectious disease expert. He doesn't have a doctorate, but we call him Dr. Doom anyway. Certainly by virtue of experience, he's got everything but the dissertation. Fred, welcome to the show. It's Fred Brown, noted epidemiology expert.
Now we have a different virus we're going to be talking about.
And a different vaccine.
And also a different vaccine, yes. One of the things that I know Moderna just got FDA approved, I believe last Friday. And one of the things I was asking if you could do any kind of comparison between the two that are now on the market, as it were. With Pfizer, I know you have to store at ungodly cold temperatures, and that's a really bad situation. Whereas I'm told that the Moderna one is more like a refrigerator freezer type temperature. And so that would make it a lot easier for the healthcare providers and the drugstores. I just saw the CVS president on TV this morning. He's talking about how they like to use their gazillion CVS stores to get that out. So how do those two vaccines compare? Because I have a lot of people asking me, which one should I take? And I go, I don't know whether there's really a difference, but you can't mix them, right? You can't take the Pfizer and then the Moderna. It's got to be one or the other, right?
That's right. That's all we've tested for right now. I think it's likely that within a technology platform that you might be able to take them both, but it's not advised because we haven't tested it yet. I think eventually we might get there, but it's not really that important as it turns out. If you want, I can show you some of the data that was presented to the FDA. We can certainly talk about some of the supply chain stuff. I'm working on that extensively, and there is a big difference in the supply chain complexity with Pfizer versus Moderna. And you're right, it's all about the freezing. The Pfizer vaccine is much more fragile than the Moderna vaccine. The Moderna vaccine, they kind of in June, July last year, this year, excuse me, they actually changed one of the key ingredients. And as a result of that, they were able to move from a minus 70 environment, minus 70 degrees Celsius, so that's almost minus 100 Fahrenheit, to
cool.
I'm a European, so I always think about centigrade. But they were able to move from that minus 94 Fahrenheit environment to a plus 4. I'm sorry, minus 4 Fahrenheit situation. So that was really helpful. And while Pfizer did not make that change, they decided to keep going because they were a little bit behind Moderna. They didn't have as much manufacturing understanding as Moderna did when they were rolling things out. They just wanted to get out fast. We'll talk a little bit about that.
And the other thing is Moderna, they can crank out a lot more vaccine than Pfizer can, right? That's the other thing.
Well, it's yet to be seen. The thing about Pfizer is it only takes 1/3 of the dose level. So you're only 30 micrograms versus 100 micrograms. So even if Moderna still has to crank out 3 times more just to stay even on a dosage basis.
Okay.
That's sort of interesting. these little tidbits that come into play. So I'm not sure that Moderna will continue to out-manufacture Pfizer in terms of dosage. But I'll show you some of the things that were actually what I did is I actually created a presentation that kind of summarizes it because unfortunately Moderna and Pfizer weren't exactly comparable. They didn't have. We'll go into some of it. Let me see what I've got here. I think this is the right one. Let's go up the page here, and
there we go.
There we are. And so, I'll just start right here. How's that sound? This is the race, right? This is the big race. And what's interesting about the race, Pfizer against Moderna, is that basically these are the same technology platforms. They're both mRNA platforms. And you can see Moderna actually did all their discovery and preclinical work by March 4th. They were already into human beings by March 4th. That's unheard of, right? They'd only just characterized the whole virus on January 10th. So, in less than a month, about a month and a half, they went from all the way through all the animal studies, all the way right into human beings. Pfizer took a little more time. Pfizer actually didn't have a technology. They had to go and look for one. So they went to BioNTech, like in the United States, called BioNTech, and they had to license in the product. And they were actually still testing which one they wanted to license in already through June. So they had 4 different options with BioNTech, and they decided to go with this 162 2B option. They then and they were already in phase 1. So they looked at the phase 1 results. And phase 1, basically, you're looking at whether you're getting an immune response. In phase 2, 3, you want to make sure that that immune response is actually effective. So in phase 1, well, we'll talk a little bit about those phases. So here we are. Moderna, you can see, actually started March 4th. Pfizer didn't start until about a month later, in April 1st. And then Moderna was done with its phase 1 in June 1st. And basically, Pfizer started its, this graph is wrong, I'm going to change it, but if Pfizer started its at the same time. So basically, Pfizer caught up with Moderna by June, which is a lot. That's hard to do when you're a month behind. And then they surpassed them in phase 2, 3, right? So they not only got to the market earlier by 10 days, they actually enrolled 50% more people in the trial. I mean, that's a remarkable achievement. And so they were better scaled to do the work than Moderna was. And what's interesting is the Pfizer design was a lot smarter and a lot more efficient and a lot more complicated. So they actually executed better than Moderna. If I had to say, who's been executed, that doesn't say anything about the technology, who has best technology. I'm just saying, as far as getting through the regulatory process, Pfizer had more experience, and it showed. And so what Moderna did, it's in September, they looked around and said, you know what, we don't have enough minorities and ethnicities, and we don't have enough older people in the trial, and we want to be able to test that. And so they actually slowed down their enrollment. They said, we're still going to go after 30,000 people, but we're going to now go after the elderly and minority classes so that we can demonstrate more with our trial. So they actually slowed down their trial in September, and then they enrolled the people that they wanted to enroll, the targeted audiences, and then they continued on, and that's what they did. Pfizer had the same problem, but you know what Pfizer did? They said, let's make it bigger. Right? They're doubling down on their size. They're doubling down on their competitive advantage. They're pushing hard on saying, okay, we can manage this complexity, and we don't think Moderna can keep up. And they were right. And so Moderna has had, but the thing is, as you point out, Moderna's had a few years to think about their platform and their manufacturing, and they actually have done some of the manufacturing. So they knew what to put in, what to take out in terms of their manufacturing to make it more stable. And so Moderna has an advantage actually in distribution. Pfizer has an advantage in terms of time. So here is, as you know, we looked at these endpoints, and the overview on both Moderna and Pfizer is the checks means that their current clinical trials actually did demonstrate these things. So you can take those off the list of your worries. There's still in safety an issue where we don't have long-term safety results because we've only known about this virus for 9 months. The longest we could possibly have the safety is 9 months. And in fact, all we have is since it's gone into human beings, which is since March. So that's we have to just wait that out. And we'd like to get to a point where the clinical trials, especially the large trials, are at 6 months plus. If we were, going to do this, and I think that's going to be a requirement from the FDA in order to go from an EUA or an emergency use authorization to a full approval, we call a biological license application. In effectiveness, it reduced the severities of symptoms, and it was a fully, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. That's the best we do is the randomized controlled clinical trials, and you can see, though, that there's still a couple of questions open about efficacy. We don't know about transmission. There's some interestingly, Moderna submitted something at the last minute afterwards to the FDA. Wasn't part of the discussion that says, by the way, we think we have an impact on transition, which is a huge thing.
Big deal.
They just said one little footnote. And then there's also, we don't know about the reduction of duration of symptoms because we didn't test long enough yet, and we don't know how they compare because they didn't do a side-by-side trial. We're getting as close to a comparison between Moderna and Pfizer as we possibly can without actually, unifying the trial. We don't have an understanding of the difference between this platform and other platforms, which would be interesting. Scalability, we don't know yet. It looks like Moderna has an early lead. But I think Pfizer is likely to catch up. The durability also, we can't know just because we haven't had it in people for long enough. So with that, let's take a look at the results. So here's phase 1. And here, the idea was, how much immune response do people have? And what was interesting about this is that after you take the vaccine, they compared it to both groups compared it to convalescent plasma levels. And each time, if convalescent plasma levels were 100, Pfizer jumped up to about 150 after 2 doses, and Moderna went up to 180. So the immune response of circulating antibodies, that's the antibodies that are out there being produced and don't get reproduced. They're not manufactured by the body. They're just out there circulating, is 50 to 80% higher than if you actually got the virus. And that's remarkable. You normally, when we do a vaccine, we don't see, it's usually a partial response. In order to get the full response, you actually have to have the disease. In this case, we have to actually have a better response to what we're interested in than the virus itself, which is interesting. Unfortunately, there was the Moderna on the 71 plus, there was a notable waning after about at the end of the study in the over 71-year-old immune response. And we'll start to think about that as we look at some of the clinical data later. It's still protective, we think, but it waned, and much more than the other age groups. The other big question was, are we manufacturing antibodies to actually continue to have memory so that when we go beyond when we finally dilute all the antibodies that are circulating, but we have a memory to what's there? And the answer there is we have 2 different kinds of tests. The first is CD4 test. That's a memory helper B cells. It actually says, hey, there is something to attack. And the other are the T cells, the CD8 precursors. And those actually neutralize and eliminate the viral particles. Moderna only tested for CD4. At least they only reported CD4. And they were similar to the Pfizer. And you can see it's about a 4-fold increase. Pfizer also looked at CD8, which I think is important because you want to have as much of a response as possible. We'll talk about mutagenesis in a little while. And you can see that in this case, it was 12-fold higher, slightly over 12-fold higher response than just getting the disease yourself. Again, a tremendous accomplishment. So the result is, and when people say, hey, should you take the vaccine if I've already had the disease? What's your answer?
Yes.
Heck
Absolutely.
yeah. Right. I want to have the 50% and the 4 times more. I don't want to sit there, being right. So the answer is yes. You want, if you've had the disease, you still want to get the virus, this vaccine.
And in both cases, you have to get 2 shots, right?
In both cases, you need 2 shots. So with Pfizer, you only have to wait 21 days. And you see an impact after 7 days after that second shot. With Moderna, their test was that they actually you inject after 28 days, the second dose, and then they waited 14 days. So the amount of time that Pfizer is claiming that they need in order to have full immune response is actually 5 weeks. While with Moderna, it's over a month and a half, right? It's like seven weeks because you had to go through a 4-week plus a 2-week assessment period. 4 weeks, so 6 weeks versus 4 weeks.
Let
Right.
me also throw out when you get vaccinated, one of the questions I'm getting from people is, do I get a card that I can show the airlines or I can show to whomever that says I have been vaccinated and both doses or whatever, so that I should be okay? That's what they're all wondering.
Oh yes, there'll be cards that are given out with your first dose, and you'll get a first stamp, and you're supposed to bring that card back again, get a second dose, and that will be right now what we offer for identification. Now, some countries, the WHO is coming out in March with an entire kind of application they'd like to put on your cell phone that says we'd like to see this kind of information everyone who's traveling around to confer to be internationally correct. So, but within the United States, I think it'll just be the card. When you start to move international, I think you're going to need to have an international level, because all vaccination ID or vaccination attestament.
And you won't be traveling to the UK, that's for sure.
I'll go into that if we have time.
It's mutated into some monster virus there or something, right?
Yeah, some really interesting things. You want me? I can talk about that.
Interesting in the Chinese curse sense of the word. It sounds like.
I'll go back. I'll come back to that because at the end, because it's a really important point. I want to make sure let me just drain the slides here about the comparison between the Pfizer slides and the Moderna slides, and then we'll talk about mutations. Here's Pfizer, 44,400, Moderna, 30,351. You can see half of them were in placebo, so only half the people actually got the active ingredient. So when you look at the numbers, you'll see it's based on 15,000 people for Moderna and 22,000, about 17, 18,000 for Pfizer. The female and male, 50-50, that's good, right? There wasn't any bias in the selection. White, 82% to 79%. There was slightly higher use because the Moderna stopped the trial, actually tried to get the concentration of this target population into the trial more actively than Pfizer was able to. So that's slightly better if you're worried about the impact on an ethnicity or a race. You're slightly underrepresented as a Black person in both trials, which is disappointing, but you're not if you're Hispanic. You're certainly and Chinese is slightly approximately correctly represented as well. So the idea here is you want to make sure that you've got a representative, very large part of the population. It's completely representative, so that you can look at that and say, I see myself in there. I'm a white male between 18 and 65. I can see there was plenty of people in my category that got vaccinated, and I can feel pretty good about this. So in the case of Black Americans and those at health risks, it depends a little bit on which health risk you're at, whether you're fully represented or not. You might want to wait a little bit depending on the health risk you've got. And if you're immunocompromised, if you're pregnant, if you're a child, or if you have significant allergies, then those people were actually excluded from the trial completely, and we haven't tested those people yet. So between 16 and 18, the Pfizer group does test them, but they were underrepresented. They only had about 100 people in that space.
Yeah, so that's another one. Is everybody wants to get their kids back in school, and we're not even testing that age group at all.
No, they will. They will start. Pfizer announced and Moderna both have announced that they want to start looking at that. There are two ways of doing it. One is to start a whole new trial, which says, these people are different. They're a different population. They have different immune response, especially for children under 2. That's very often the case. When you get to be, over 12, it's a little bit less the case, where you're completely different from the adult immune response. But there are significant differences, and so we either bridge to say, you see, these differences are bridged. We can use now the data that we use for adults, and we're confident. Or let's start the trial over again and just enroll like we would completely from anew. I think they're going to do bridging studies just because it's faster and they want to get out there faster. I think we'll be ready to do that at the point of submission for the BLA, which we think is going to be about 6 months away. The BLA is the actual application. Right now, we're still under emergency use. So we think about June, July timeframe, we will have tested for children and we'll have a general vaccine that's been approved by both these companies in that timeframe. So here's the process we went through. We 21 days apart for Pfizer. Moderna was 28 days apart. And then they had a 7-day, as I said. So it's a 4-week to efficacy endpoint. Moderna has a 6-week efficacy endpoint. And that becomes significant when you have to try to figure out how immune your people are as you roll this out, who's still susceptible, who's not susceptible. So Moderna takes a lot longer. Interestingly, J&J is a 1 dose and they have a 2-week observation period. So we can hit full immunity of the J&J endpoint results in 2 weeks, not 4 and not 6. That'll make a significant difference to policymakers and yourself if you only have to take one and done and you're done, and in 2 weeks you're ready to go. So if you're ready for that big trip and you need a vaccine that's 2 weeks away, you're too late for Moderna, you're too late for Pfizer, but J&J, you could do it. That'll happen. So there are some interesting little tidbits that come through here. Also, if you're concerned about trying to return to a rural area that's very hard to get to, if you're part of the vaccination group, we're worried about this. Rural Wyoming, we only want to go there once. Take the J&J vaccine, right? And sure don't want to have Pfizer because that's going to, you have to bring out that twice at -20. Minus 70, that's a pain. But here's the case definition endpoint. You can see basically anybody who had any of these symptoms, and we talked about this last week, was said, aha, you've got that symptom. That means you've got COVID. Let me test for it. Yep, sure enough, you've tested positive and you had one of those symptoms. So you're in a special group and we're going to assemble all these guys together. At the end of the day, we had 170 people who got COVID in the Pfizer and 180 or so as I recall. Actually, it was over 230 that were in the Moderna trial who got COVID. And so that then we looked just at those 180 and just at those 180 and just at the people who got sick. So here is how efficacious it was, right? Here are the people who got sick, and basically 95% of the people who were the efficaciousness, what we were looking for from the FDA was over 50%. So over 50%, if you had 200 people that got sick, you would expect 100 and 100 if it was completely ineffective, right? If you move that to 150, so that if you get 25, if you get 125 versus 75, that's a 50% efficacy rate, and you're approved. In this case, out of the 200, we had 190. Well, we're not, and only 10 that were vaccinated. So 10 people vaccinated, and 10 of them got sick out of that group of 200 versus the 190 in the placebo group who got sick. So that's how you look at the efficacy numbers overall. You can see statistically these vaccines are the same. I'm still a little bit worried about the over 65 number. I think this might be something that's real, and I think it might be that they don't have quite as much efficacy in people in Moderna over 65. Time will tell. Statistics say it should all even out, but I think it may be a real signal. We'll have to wait and see. You can see that if you're at risk, if you've got certain disease types, still you're 95% reduction in the effect in the infection rates. If you're white, 95% reduction, or 93.2, close enough statistically. If you're a community of color, 95 or 97%, again, effective. Male, 96 or 95%. Female, 93% effective. So in every case, these are vastly superior to most vaccines that are out there in terms of efficacy, and certainly higher than the endpoint we were looking for. So that's the good news, is that if you go to the doctor right now and you get Moderna or Pfizer, as far as efficacy goes, probably doesn't make a difference. Statistically, it doesn't make a difference at all. So you shouldn't have to ask for one or the other. I want to watch that 65 plus number. So if you're over 65, you might have a slight preference to get the Pfizer drug based on this data, but it's only a slight preference, and again, statistically, it is not significant. So that's the other big thing was it prevents severe infections. So of the Pfizer group, of that 180 I talked about, 9 of them had severe infections, and of the 230 or so Moderna people, 11 of them had severe infections. Of the 11 that are on Moderna, none of them were in the active group. All of them were in the placebo group. The chance of that happening randomly is about 1 in 10,000. So it's a very significant result, and we think that this therefore does prevent active serious COVID disease in both cases. I think that Moderna actually had a broader set of endpoints here, so it actually tested for more different severe responses, including kidney failure and all sorts of things that you might be worried about. Again, their results were slightly better than Pfizer's. Pfizer's complained a little bit at the FDA. They said, it was a little bit unfair. We had someone right at the border, is 93% oxygen level. She never went to the hospital. Meanwhile, everyone who in the placebo group, turned green. I'm joking, but they were saying that they thought that it wasn't really a true serious adverse event, but it classified as one. So that's what the numbers are. I think slowly but surely the statistics will work their way through, and you'll see no difference between the two drugs.
We got about 4 minutes left.
You're kidding.
No.
So here's Moderna. You can see the reduction in COVID cases. We never got to the 94.1. Here is Pfizer. So people are going to say, do I have to take 2 doses? And the answer is, if you want to stay safe and be that 95%, you better take 2 doses. The best you can hope for with 1 dose of Pfizer drug, or probably 1 dose of the Moderna drug, is between 50 and 80% effectiveness. And that doesn't put you in herd immunity range if you're a community. So you take both doses. And there may be an opportunity to look at single dose, but wait until afterwards when they've done a clinical trial. So let me talk about mutagenesis quickly, if that makes sense. And that is here. We had in the United Kingdom, they have a variation where they've moved from in the London area from a virus that was only 28% representative in the group in all the viruses in London to now being 68%.
Wow.
In 3 weeks. And when you do all the math, it turns out that means that it probably has penetrated that community 70% faster than the original virus. And so that's how we got to this, holy cow, look at this. It was almost at nothing. And all of a sudden it became, over half of what we see today. And that's how come they say it's 70% more transmittable. Now, you know how that happened? They think, now they don't know for sure, but they think that there was an immunocompromised person in the mix who had a continuous long-term COVID infection. And they were immunocompromised, so they kept injecting them full of Regeneron monoclonal antibodies. And slowly but surely what happened was the virus got smarter and smarter and smarter, and it has so the amount of mutation it had 14 mutations in a very short period of time.
Oh, geez.
About 2 to 4 months period. And so we think that we artificially selected for this because we medicated this particular patient, and he cultured this virus and then spread it. And that's what can happen when you put things under selective pressure. So we really have to watch, what medicines we're giving people, manage it actively, and make sure that this doesn't happen to our vaccines. Because if it happens to a vaccine, we got big problems. So that's how it all works anyway.
All right, boy, I'll tell you. I just was watching that over the weekend, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't realize this thing was so smart, so.
Oh yeah, there are so many. I mean, it goes through 30, 40,000 generations in a few days. So, you don't have to be that smart. You just have to have enough of you, and eventually you're going to break through, right?
Yeah, veteran at the door. Okay, well, we'll get you back next week.
Love to. We got so much more to talk about. I'm sorry, I was supposed to talk about safety, and we can certainly go into that. The answer is these vaccines are statistically the same.
Okay.
And across safety and efficacy.
Well, and the other question is, how soon can I get it? And I've looked at for the state of Michigan, they issued their how they're going to do it and what groups, starting off with the healthcare folks, and then the older compromised folks and or people with other situations like that. And then anybody over 65, of course, Matt's just a young kid, so he'll have to wait till the final group.
Yeah, right.
And so, but I'm an older.
Missed it by 11 months. Yeah. Right.
Oh, missed it by just that much.
You got to start smoking again and tell people you're older than you are, man.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Great.
Well, it's going to be pretty wild out there for about 4 months, and after that, I think starting around June, people will basically, if they want the vaccine, I think they'll be able to get it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm hearing. Is by early summer, if everything plays out like everybody thinks, we'll start to be okay. But it's probably going to be fall before things really start coming back to normal, right?
Oh yeah, I think that's right. Economic normalcy, fall, kind of Halloween time frame, and then health normalcy even longer, unfortunately. But we'll go into that next week. How does that sound? I got some
That's good, Fred. All right. Thanks very much, Fred Brown, our resident infectious disease expert. We'll be back again next week, the 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, everybody have a Merry Christmas. And next week, we'll wish you a Happy New Year. For right now, it's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And you've been watching the M² TechCast.
Traditional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life. But LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.